بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما لله تبارك وتعالى. Inshallah تبارك وتعالى, we'll continue our weekend reading in the book Revival of the Religious Sciences. This is a muhaddab, which is an abridgment of the Ihya Ulumuddin by the Sheikh Saleh Ahmed Al-Shami, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. And we reached to the section on knowledge and the praiseworthy amount of the Islamic sciences or the sciences of the religion. Let's recite Al-Fatiha to the soul of Sayyidina al-Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-Fatiha. What page are we on?
Page 14.
Bismillah. Bismillah, let's begin.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu wa-salamu ala Rasulullah. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, with this consideration in mind, knowledge can be said to be of three parts. One part is all blameworthy, another is all praiseworthy, and the third is praiseworthy only in its sufficient measure, i.e., it becomes blameworthy in excess and by delving too deeply into it. As for that part which is all blameworthy, it consists of that which yields no benefit in this world or in the afterlife, for it contains harm which overwhelms its benefit, such as magic, talismans, and astrology.
Here, you want to notice that Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, his concern is showing us how to travel the path to the hereafter. And whenever we engage in a form of learning, we should measure it according to its benefit, religiously and worldly. So we only want ilm that is nafi', that is beneficial knowledge. So any knowledge that doesn't yield a religious or worldly benefit, then it is a knowledge that we should avoid. Now,
as for that part which is all praiseworthy, even if it is pursued to the point of thorough examination, it consists in the knowledge of Allah, exalted is He, His attributes, His acts, His universal laws, sunan, and in His creation and His wisdom in arranging the afterlife so that it comes first in importance to this world. This is because this type of knowledge is sought for its own sake as much as it is in order to attain felicity in the afterlife.
So the more you learn about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala by knowing His attributes, His actions, His names, the way He deals with the creation, and that would help you become more pious. It is related that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was once with his companions, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, may Allah be pleased with them all, and he said, I swear by Allah, I am the most knowledgeable among you about Allah, and I fear Him the most. I am the most knowledgeable among you about Allah, and I fear Him the most. So the more one knows and thinks about and ponders on the names, the attributes, the actions of Allah And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with the creation, it'll increase your realization of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when one realizes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who the whole entire affair belongs to him, then one is going to be a more obedient servant to him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And since that is the case, that knowledge, even to details of pondering and thinking about it, is all beneficial, because it leads to preferring the hereafter over this world. And that means that person is going to be closer to acts of obedience, fulfilling their obligations, doing the optional voluntary deeds or supererogatory deeds, and avoiding the unlawful. And Allah described the disbelievers when he said, بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. Rather, they desire, they prefer the life of this world when the life of the hereafter is better and abiding. It doesn't come to an end.
As for that knowledge of which only a sufficient measure of it is praiseworthy, it consists of all the types of knowledge which we have mentioned, apropos collective obligations.
Which means furud al-kifayat. That means those things which are communal obligations. That if someone does it, the others are clear of that responsibility.
For in each science, one can be content with its general notions, which is the minimum, or seek what is beyond these, which is the moderate choice, or one can pursue its thorough examination, in which case one will find that it yields no benefit for the rest of one's lifespan. Therefore, be one of two people. Either be one who is preoccupied with himself, or one who is devoted to others after finishing with himself. But be with
occupying with oneself also entails that one is working on oneself, removing the blameworthy characteristics, which are al-muhlikat, those ruinous characteristics, and adorning oneself with the al-munjiyat, those praiseworthy characteristics. As the pious say, the one who knows himself will know his Lord. Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbah. The one who knows himself will know his Lord. Meaning, you will know yourself as a deficient servant, and you will know your Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the able sustainer, nourisher of the entire universe.
But beware of engaging in the reforming of others before reforming yourself.
So, as they say, put on your mask before you worry about the mask of others. Subhanallah. And that is to protect yourself. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ku anfusakum wa ahlikum. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ku anfusakum. O you who believe, save yourselves and your families. But you cannot save no one else if you are ruined. So take care of yourself by performing in obedience to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Now,
if you are a person who is occupied with himself, only engage in that knowledge which is an individual obligation upon you according to the requirement of your state, and similarly in knowledge concerning the outward acts such as learning how to pray and perform purification, tahara. However, the most important science that everyone has neglected is the science of the attributes of the heart, namely that which is praiseworthy and blameworthy.
So here's the concern of Imam al-Ghazali. Take care of your personal obligations. And listen, an advice from us to you. We are neglecting in this. Far too many Muslims in our time, they don't know the personal obligations of the religion. They know the form of obligations, not the reality of them. So it's very likely that you would go to a person and you would say to them, tell me the rules of the prayer, and they don't know them. What are the conditions of the prayer? What are the integrals of the prayer? What are the invalidators of the prayer? What are the recommended matters of the prayer? What are the obligations that relate to a tahara, purification? What are the obligations of wudu? What are the invalidators of wudu? What are the conditions of wudu? What are the obligations of ghusl? And you would find, even in the prayer that we do 5 times a day, the person doesn't know how to pray. They just know the outward form, and sometimes they don't have that right. That is a major sin, and we live in it as if it's nothing wrong with it. You know, as is in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la yara biha ba'sa. We don't see anything wrong with it. When it is something that is ruinous, to not know the personal obligations of the religion. You are a major sinner if you don't take care of this knowledge. So Imam al-Ghazali is saying, take care of yourself. And the first way to do that is to learn what is obligatory upon you in relation to your state. We buy and we sell and don't know the rules of buying and selling. We employ and we work, but not know the rules of employment and hiring. We didn't learn any of these rules Islamically. We just go. And that's why we find that many of our actions are unlawful to the sacred law, because we didn't even concern ourselves with learning it, let alone being cautious. Like from the beginning, we didn't consult the sacred law before we engage. And this is what Al-Habib Abdullah bin Hussein bin Tahir mentioned when he said, do not engage in any act before you know the rule of the sacred law in relation to it. And Imam al-Bukhari indicated that when he said, al-ilmu qabla al-qawli wal-amal, that knowledge must precede every statement and action. You don't do anything, don't say anything until you know the rule of Allah in regard to that. Is it obligatory? Is it recommended? Is it permissible? Is it disliked? Is it unlawful? Is it valid? Is it invalid? Everything we say or do, we should put al-ahkam al-taklifiyya, the rules of the sacred law for those who are accountable, in front of that before we engage. If we can train ourselves to do that, what is the judgment of the religion in relation to this thing? We will find ourselves fulfilling all of our personal obligations. Then after that, the most important thing is to work on the states of the heart, removing those blameworthy characteristics and adorning the heart with the praiseworthy characteristics. Now,
Therefore, do not engage in collective obligations, especially if there are others who take care of them. This is because the one who causes loss to himself through something which is a cause of reform for others is a fool.
listen to that. The one who ruins himself while doing something that reforms someone else is foolish. Safi, right? Take care of yourself. If we said that to the wealth, we would be quickly paying attention to that. You work hard and give all your money to someone else. Who would accept? No one, right? Oh, it's my money. I worked for it. So you understood this concept when it came to the world, but you didn't understand it when it came to the religion. And the world is going to come to an end, and the things you do for the religion are going to be forever. So that same concern you have for yourself, for your wealth, and for your possessions, have that same concern and greater for your religious state. Now,
Once you finish with your soul and its purification, and you are able to abstain from inward and outward sinning, and how far away
Outward sinning from deeds and sayings, inward sinning from states of the heart. So you have the outward actions that are visible, what you say and what you do. So abstain from those type of sins. Then you have the inward sins that you cannot see, but they're states of the heart. Refrain from that.
then you can engage in collective obligations, and you can assume a priority in the type of collective obligations you engage in.
Right. So there's a priority in how you should act. Fulfill your personal obligations. Clean yourself up, then work for the society. And that is in stages by working in a way that you don't neglect what is obligatory for you and what is your main concern as you traveling the path to the hereafter. Now,
The cause of engaging in the science of juristic and theological differences. 1.4.
this is the fourth section.
You should know that after Allah's messenger, may Allah's blessing and peace be upon him, the office of Khalifa was assumed by the rightly guided caliphs,
which were Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, and Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhum. And they are the best of this nation after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
The latter were leaders, had knowledge of Allah, exalted as He, possessed understanding of His rulings, and were able to issue religious edicts independently.
Here, so they were first imams and scholars in Allah. So when Imam al-Ghazali ever talks about a scholar, he means ulama al-akhirah, the scholars of the hereafter, who were scholars who were knowledgeable about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just outward rules, but they also knew the rules, because there is no reality of spirituality without the outward practice of the sacred law. So they knew the rule of the sacred law, and they also knew they had a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the state of the heart, and they were mujtahidun. They were those qualified to independently issue legal rulings.
Thus, they sought the help of faqih only on the rare occasions when consultation was necessary.
Because
Consequently,
they were independently able to extract legal rulings. So the fuqaha among them were used in times of mutual consultation on issues. So here they used to say, al-umara hum al-ulama, that the leaders in the early days used to be scholars themselves. Now today, the rulers are not scholars, they're just politicians. But in the time of the Salaf, the ruler himself was a scholar and able to issue religious rulings and judgments. But when worldly positions separated from religion, the worst of people became leaders instead of the best of people.
consequently, the real men of knowledge devoted themselves to knowledge of the afterlife and avoided issuing religious edicts and decisions relating to governing people in this world by delegating these matters to others. When the office of the
Khilafah is the rulership when someone becomes the leader of the Muslim nation.
When the office of Khilafah was later assumed by people who did not deserve it, they were forced to seek the help of the faqihs and their company. At this stage, there remained men of knowledge among the tabi'in who followed in the footsteps of those who sought the afterlife. But when they were sought by the rulers, they shunned them and fled. The caliphs were consequently forced to insist on their pursuit and return for their appointment as judges.
Those early ulama, when they saw that the rulers were not of the pious people and they were using judges to further their political agendas, those great scholars fled from any type of public office. So it became for them, they were like zuhad, those people who abstained from the dunya, and they considered the one who's at the door of the ruler as blameworthy, right? They called them ulama usul, those evil scholars who preferred the life of this world over the hereafter.
When the people of those times saw the dignity of the men of knowledge and the rulers' demand for them, they longed to seek knowledge themselves, hoping thereby to obtain dignity and attain status with the rulers.
Here, I remember this when I think about it. The scholar who has izzah, who has dignity. And I'm reminded when I think of that, that our teacher used to say to us, whoever has been given or bestowed, favored, endowed with knowledge of the religion, and they think that someone else has been given something greater, they have belittled what Allah has made great. Like, whoever Allah gave them knowledge of the religion, and they think someone else has been given something better, they have belittled what Allah has made great. Because the knowledgeable person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a virtue over regular people who worship Allah to the extent like the Prophet has the least over the least of us. As he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, فَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَالْفَضْلِ عَلَى أَنَّاكُمْ. The virtue of the scholar over the worshiper is like the virtue of me over the least of you. What is the status of the scholars? As Allah said, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Those who really fear Allah, they are al-ulama. They are the scholars. And who are al-ulama? As Imam al-Ghazali said, al-ulama'u billah. Those scholars of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are knowledgeable of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala.
Thus, they engaged in learning the science of religious edicts and offered their services to the caliphs. The faqirs consequently sought after rulers, whereas before they were sought after. Previously, they were dignified because of shunning kings, but have become humiliated because of seeking the company of kings.
Subhanallah. And when you see learned people at the doors of the wealthy, because this is now today, you find learned people who study the religion and they're play toys at the hands of wealthy people. One of the ugliest things we see in our time is masjid boards that's ruled, led by politicians, businessmen, wealthy people, and the imam is their employee. Ya Latif. So the one who's giving the rules is subjugated by the one who doesn't know the rules. Allahu Akbar. Ya Latif. Ya Latif. You see the difference? When the rulers used to seek after the ulama, now, and the rulers were the wealthy and the politicians, now you see the people at the footstep of the wealthy and the politician, to where the politician runs the masjid, the businessman runs the masjid, and they have the votes, and the masjid become a place of dunya, seats for position, not surrounding around the hereafter. To the point, in some places you find they fight over who's going to be on the board, who's going to run the masjid, till they take it to the non-Muslim court. Ya Latif. One of this happened in the masjid, and the judge said, I can't believe y'all in front of me about your religion. They're in the courts. fighting over control of the masjid. And none of them are learned people. None of them study the deen, none of them, but they're fighting over the leadership of the masjid. Who's going to employ the scholar? And the scholar puts his head down and becomes a plaything for the wealthy or the politician. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us that we never be like that and remove that from the Muslim nation.
In those times, there was such demand for knowledge of religious edicts and for settling people's disputes due to their extreme need in those areas. Then there came rulers who listened to people's discourses on dogmas and who were inclined to hear the different arguments to substantiate them. When their desire for debate and argument about theology became known, people dedicated themselves to the science of theology, writing abundantly on the subject. Then, in later generations, some rulers disapproved of theology because of what it led to in terms of aggregated sectarianism. They became, therefore, more inclined towards debates on matters of fiqh, showing what is preferable to follow, especially in the schools of Shafi and Abu Hanifa. Thus, people abandoned speculative theology and ardently devoted themselves to questions of juristic differences, especially those between Abu Hanifa and al-Shafi'i.
And there are many books that are written of the difference of opinion between al-Shafi'iyya wal-Hanafiyya in this subject. This is what Imam al-Ghazali is indicating.
But they were lenient in the differences with Malik, Sufyan, and Ahmad. May Allah have mercy on their souls. This is the only motive for devotion to the knowledge of juristic and theological differences and debates. Indeed, had the souls of those possessing temporal power inclined themselves towards another type of knowledge, then these people would also have been inclined to it.
Right. So here, this is an indication for us, because all of this stuff needs to be practical, right? Don't lean to using knowledge for obtaining the world. If you get something from knowledge of the worldly, from Allah's side, this is good. But from your side, it should be the desire to educate people so they can travel the path to Allah, right? One of our teachers said, it was great advice in Syria. He said, if you could make your living from something other than the da'wah, then do so, right? Do some kind of business, some kind of trade that allows you to be financially free to engage in da'wah. Because the one who makes their livelihood solely through a da'wah will be inclined to compromise a da'wah, right? So if, for instance, that's why what we're talking about, if you find the imam whose sole money comes from being the imam, whoever pays him will influence his activities. I'm thinking of what an imam told me. Oh, he said, whoever funds you, runs you. Whoever funds you, runs you. So make sure you're careful who funds you, because that's what's going to run you, right? So if you can earn, not saying it's haram, because Imam al-Ghazali mentioned that when it's permissible to take compensation for your work and all of that, but don't make the deen for the dunya. Rather, even if you earn, have the dunya in your hand, not in your heart. And acquire dunya for the akhirah. And in this way, you won't be compromising. Inshallah ta'ala. Now,
1.5. The properties of the learner and the teacher. The properties of the learner.
so the properties في آداب المتعلم والمعلم. There are whole books written on this subject. And inshallah, we should read them because when we started this in the beginning, we had this thing to read the manners and behaviors between the student and teacher. Right? This is very important. And we live in a time, in fact, when we were coming to Fajr, we were talking about this, where people don't know the position between the learned and the unlearned. Even the unlearned act as though they are independent. And how can you be independent if you don't know? Right? You need to learn. So you need to be dependent on people who know. As Allah said, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. Right? But due to certain factors, religious rulings have went away and desires have become the standard. Which is the idea of I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. So that passion, that desire, even impacts how people acquire their religious knowledge, which is why they don't know oftentimes, because the desire says, I don't need no one to teach me. And you notice Imam al-Ghazali here mentions al-muta'alim wal-mu'allim, the student and the teacher, both exist, right? And there are mannerisms for both, right? As Al-Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi said, ad-deen kullahu adab, that the religion, all of it is manners and behaviors, is etiquette, the whole religion. Let's stop here, inshallah, and we'll pick up tomorrow, so we can start fresh here, inshallah. I remember. Wasallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, let me remind you of we're in the last few weeks before the Islamic Unity Conference here in Atlantic City. This is an important gathering. It is our yearly mass gathering where all of us, especially those of the 3453 family, come together and network and review and benefit. And this year, we assembled our elders who have put in work for decades, our current leaders, our sisters who are leading in the community. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to focus this year on building our village. Also, here is the hotel information for the discount hotels, because you should be concerned about, as well as registering. There is everything you need there. There is the link to register. There is the hotel information. That's the code for the discounted hotels. Because in Atlantic City, in July, you're talking about 3 times the price if you don't get this discount. So I would advise everyone to register and book your hotel space, because the hotel site, uh, the hotel was at the site of the conference. So inshallah, we hope to see all of you. And I remind you, please share the information about the conference, share it with your friends. It's something you don't want to miss, inshallah ta'ala. And it helps us in bringing us together. Everyone talks about unity and what we need to do. We need to discuss that, and we need to work on it, and we need to cooperate with one another, especially in our community. May Allah tabarak wa ta'ala facilitate it for us. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.